Hi, everybody. I'm Hector Garcia. I'm a CPA, CITP, and CGMA. I'll explain what those two mean a little bit later on in the video. But a CPA is a certified public accountant, which is pretty much one of the most prestigious type of certifications or designations you can have if you're going to be doing any work in the accounting world. Now, this video is going to be a comprehensive one, and it's going to be broken down into 8 parts. Part 1, we'll talk about what does it mean to be a CPA, what do CPAs do, different than what other people do, and sort of the branding element of a CPA. So that'll be part 1. Part 2, we'll talk about educational requirements. So what's the minimum requirement of education you need in order to become a CPA? Part 3, we'll talk about testing and the testing process. Part 4, once you pass the test, we'll talk about getting your license and domiciliation. So in the United States, this all varies state by state. So we'll discuss that briefly. Part 5, we'll talk about continuing education. So once you become a CPA, how you keep that certification. Part 6, we'll talk about some specializations, such as mine, the CITP and CGMA, and some additional organizations you can belong to so you can get deeper and deeper into this industry. Part 7, we'll talk about alternatives to becoming a CPA. Like you will find out through this video, there's a lot of work to become a CPA. I certainly encourage you to do it. I want you to go all the way. We need CPAs in our profession. We absolutely need more and more people to become CPAs in the next coming years. But if you are going to be working in accounting and you don't want to pursue the CPA, there are some alternatives to the CPA. So we'll discuss all those options in that part 7. And then part 8, we'll talk about how to make a living in this profession. So once you're a CPA, like should you go work for someone? Should you start your own business? We'll discuss all that stuff in detail. Let's start with what does it mean to be a CPA? So there are 2 aspects of what it means to be a CPA. One I would call the branding aspect, and the other one I would call the functional aspect. Let's talk about the branding aspect. So first of all, the CPA profession has done a wonderful job at creating trust in the marketplace. Most people associate CPAs with trustworthy individuals, objective individuals, people that follow the rules, people that will keep you in check, keep you compliant, and keep you out of trouble. Okay, that's kind of the brand that the CPA profession has created. And most importantly, it has to do with being an objective third party, as not being associated with the customer, with your client, not being dependent on the client. Essentially, this whole concept of being independent is what give people trust that when a CPA says something about their client that's actually paying them money, says something about their financial statements, that it actually comes from an objective place, not from a subjective place. So that branding of independence has really, really prevailed and has helped all of us gain that sort of inherent trust when people hear the fact that you are a CPA. Also, it helps that not many CPAs have gone to jail and not many CPAs commit crimes, although there's exceptions to the rules, but the vast majority of CPAs end up being really hardworking and honest individuals that make a living in the most honest possible way. Now, there's another sort of sub-branding aspect of CPA, which has to do with the stereotype of personality of a CPA. Most CPAs are, again, this is a stereotype, they are understood to be quiet, introverted bean counters that stay at their office and crunch numbers all day long, not very talkative, not very sociable, very discreet. And although there's certainly exceptions to the rule, I myself look at myself as an extroverted CPA. The fact that this personality type is the stereotype actually helps with the brand, because when you are a small business owner, when you're a high income earner individual, and you want to trust someone with a whole bunch of information about your personal life, your goals, your dreams, your finances, do you want to talk to someone that's going to like divulge the information to everyone, or someone that is more likely not to even care and keep it to themselves? That's kind of the personality that people want to trust on a CPA. So those 2 things go hand in hand, the stereotype and the brand that the entire profession has done. Think about it. Do you want a CPA that's all over social media, that's talking about their clients and their successes all day long, talking about how much money they make? Like, do you want a CPA like that, or you want a CPA that's pretty low key and quiet, and one that's going to be with you the entire time until you retire or whatever? So that personality trait, which is not a requirement, certainly has helped us sort of co-brand with this other piece of the brand that has to do with trust and honesty and everything else. So that's the branding aspect. Let's talk about the functional aspect. Once you become a CPA, once you have a CPA license, you can do something that no one else can do, which is called an audit. You can audit a financial statement. That means that someone else can prepare a profit and loss and balance sheet for a business, and you as a CPA can go through a process, and it could be by yourself or with a team, where you audit or test a group of transactions on the entire financial statement, and you try to figure out if the stuff is being accurately stated or not, and if the financial statements are presented in generally accepted accounting principles. Once you issue the audit opinion saying, "Yep, this is a clean financial statement," then the public, the users of those financial statements, be it investors or the shareholders of the business or whatever, will then trust the information that's presented by the company. There's also another type of service which is a little bit lower level than an audit, that's called a review. And a financial statement review is like sort of a mini audit where the CPA does sort of lower level testing, but they still sort of make sure that the stuff that's represented in the financial statement, it's more or less accurate. It's not been certified and audited, but it's been reviewed or looked at by a CPA with a sort of a deep set of eyes. So those two pieces of services, the audit and the reviews, are probably what most CPAs get into the profession to do. Now, there's some CPA light type of things called a compilation or just a financial statement preparation, where you go to a small business or to any type of business really, and you prepare the financial statements for your customer, for the small business or for the business, and maybe they don't have a CFO, maybe they don't have an accountant on staff, and then what you're doing essentially is being their de facto accountant or CFO for a brief period of time to prepare that financial statement for whatever the purpose is, whether it's to present it to a bank for a loan or for a mortgage broker or whatever, or maybe even to have it prepared to then prepare a tax return. So you're going to have a financial statement that shows your income, your expenses, your assets, your liabilities, whatever it is, and then the accountant can compile them. It's not an audit, it's not a review, but they put them together so it could be accepted, read, understood by anyone that understands generally accepted accounting principles. That's actually one of the most common types of services that CPAs do. The audit and the reviews usually are kind of expensive, and they're only required on certain type of transactions. So those compiled financial statements, which sometimes is combined with bookkeeping services or monthly accounting services, that's actually a very common piece of work that CPAs end up doing. Now, the third functional thing that CPAs can do is they can do IRS representation. So the IRS accepts a CPA as having the minimal credentials allowed to be able to represent the taxpayer. So the taxpayer can give a power of attorney to a CPA, even though a CPA is not an attorney, but can give a power of attorney to a CPA. And then the CPA can speak and negotiate in behalf of a taxpayer. Now, a lot of CPAs actually prepare tax returns, and I have an entire different video where I talk about how to become a professional tax preparer. I'll put links in the description to that. That's a little bit different. Unfortunately, most people associate CPAs with tax, and those two are not necessarily the highest correlated items, although because there's so much need for tax services, a lot of CPAs also offer tax services, which again, you don't need any credentials for. We'll discuss that in a different video. But as a CPA, you can represent the taxpayer. So a lot of taxpayers, they think a CPA is sort of like perfect tax person, this tax expert. And sometimes there's a lot of CPAs that don't know anything about tax. So it's certainly one of the areas you can specialize in. Some of the other things that CPAs can do is they can do what's called internal controls and accounting systems, which is helping companies make sure that the chain of command of money being moved from the bank account all the way to the vendor, all the way to certifying and verifying that the products or services from the vendor were received and that transaction has been vetted and it's in the accounting system and there's no fraud, et cetera, et cetera. Accountants can do that. Accountants can help build those systems, can monitor those systems, and can do some sort of internal audits. Another thing that a lot of CPAs do is CPAs end up being a business controller or being the CFO of a business. So they end up being hired as being the internal accountant of a large business. Typically, if a business has less than, let's say, $10 million in sales, most likely they're not going to have an actual CPA as a CFO. But once that business creeps sort of out of the small business world and starts getting into sort of the medium-sized business world, 10 million in sales, 25 million in sales, that company needs an actual full-time CPA on staff to be the director of finance, the controller, or the CFO. And that's a typical position that CPAs hold when working for another business. And in terms of like small business, a lot of CPAs just do small business consulting. They help small business incorporate, they help small businesses organize their stuff, they help small businesses register for the licenses, they help them stay compliant, they help them fill out forms beyond just like tax. Sometimes they help them set up their payroll or help them set up their income tax compliance forms, or register for sales tax, or set up their accounting systems. A lot of CPAs focus on the technology. Like I myself, I'm a technology focused CPA, and I help people with their QuickBooks and integrate their QuickBooks with other systems like Shopify, etc. So like that's another area that CPAs functionally can do. But the only like real important ones that are sort of a minimum requirement for you to be a CPA for is those first three: is to do audits, to do compilations, to sign financial statements as a compilation, and IRS representation. Those are the top three things that the credential itself opens the door for. Otherwise, there's other three things I mentioned: being a controller, even being a CFO. You don't have to be a CPA to be CFO of a company, or business advice, or internal controls and systems. That stuff is not required for you to be a CPA, but CPAs end up doing that type of work. Okay, let's move on to educational requirements. So for you to get a CPA license, you have to have 150 credits of school. Now, 150 credits is the equivalent of an undergraduate degree, typically in accounting, which is 120 credits, and a master's degree, which is typically 30 credits. So that sum of 120 plus the 30 makes 150. Now, in some states, you can start taking the test just by having 120 credits, and then you have to make sure that after you pass the test or during the time you're taking the test, you got to complete the other 30. Some states require all 150 for you to already have them. You already have finished those 150 school credits before you can take the test. Now, there's a lot of debate in the profession whether or not that those extra 30 credits are required. Some states are experimenting with alternative ways of people earning the equivalent of those 30 credits. But as of the date of this video, it's pretty much set in stone that you have to have, again, that undergraduate degree in accounting and the equivalent of a master's degree, most of the times in accounting, sometimes in tax. I personally have an undergrad in marketing. I didn't even have an undergrad in accounting. And then I went back to school and did a whole year program called a graduate certificate in accounting that basically made my marketing degree and my accounting degree as if I did a double major. So it was basically 5 years of college, and it was essentially a double major, marketing and accounting. But even with that, I already had almost 150 credits. It wasn't enough because the extra 30 credits, there was a specific set of requirements in terms of what type of credits they can be. So like I had to have so many business law classes and so many tax classes and so many advanced accounting classes. So in those 30 postgraduate credits, there's a requirement that most of them need to be in accounting or related to accounting. So I went back to school one more time and I got a master's degree in taxation. So I basically have, essentially for the CPA, I have an undergrad in accounting, forget about the marketing part, but I have an undergrad in accounting, and then I have a master's degree in taxation. And those two things together fulfill the 150 credits. So then I was able to take the test in Florida. So let's move on to the test. Now, there's 4 parts to the CPA exam. Each time you go take the test, you get about 4 hours to take it. When you walk into the testing center, you're going to have to put your phone away, you put your keys away, put your wallet away. Like basically you get patted down. It's just you and your glasses if you wear glasses, and that's it. And then when you get there, they give you a little booklet, a paper, and a calculator. And in some cases, you get the electronic calculator on the computer, and then you start getting questions. Now, the questions, most of the questions are multiple choice. It's open book, so to speak. So there's actually not an internet search, but there's a couple of documents like sort of IRS documents, uh, accounting uh, accounting standard documents. So there's a bunch of PDF documents that you can go and you read, and sometimes you can find the answer there, and sometimes like the answers that you have to know, there's absolutely no time for you to look up each answer. Believe it or not, those 4 hours fly away. Most candidates go through the entire 4 hours before they can even finish the test. Sometimes the 4 hours go by and you didn't even get to finish. The exam also has sort of an essay component, a writing component. So there's going to be multiple choice questions and then an essay component. So you have to know your stuff. Now, it is reported that in average, the average student studies between 80 and 100 hours. Studies, this is before each exam, between 80 and 100 hours. And it's 4 exams. Now, these 4 exams, you have to take it within an 18-month period. So if you fail exams and fail exams and fail exams, you're going to keep taking it. The minute you pass the first exam, you have 18 months for you to pass all 4 exams. And as long as you pass all 4 exams within the 18-month period, then you're all set. Okay, you pass the 4 exams, the CPA exams. Actually, it's worth mentioning each exam, it's about $300, so $250, $300. So it can get expensive if you fail a couple of times. I personally failed the audit exam twice. I had zero audit experience, and I didn't study the 80 hours for audit until the third time. I did have to go back and study that much. So it's not an easy feat. Okay, so not just getting the educational requirements, which cost money because you got to pay schools and universities, then you got to pay for the test. Okay, fine. You get your education requirements, you pass your exams. Once you pass the fourth exam and you have the 150 credit hours, you're going to have to take a special state exam. Again, anybody can pass this. If you pass the CPA, you can certainly pass this. You take a state exam, which is sort of an ethics exam, and this is sort of like the minimal requirement of the state. Then you're going to submit for an application, which you have to submit for a licensure, which you're going to pay for. There's a license fee for that, and you have to pay every year or every 2 years, depending on the state. And then most of the times they do a background check to make sure you don't have any criminal background, especially when it comes to financial related things. And as long as you pass the background check, and in some states you get fingerprinted and everything, then you get your CPA license. Okay, so that's the licensure. The minute you get that CPA license, you are domiciled in that state. So generally, you're only supposed to practice in that state. You can have clients in different states, but you cannot go work in that state in an official capacity as a CPA or sign a financial statement while working in that state if you don't get a license in that state as well. Now, the nice thing about it is states have these agreements where you don't have to take the entire 4 exam series. Sometimes there's a sort of a light or express process. There's maybe a mini exam or a mini application that you send in, and you can get license in other states. Medical professions have the same issue. Attorneys have the same issue. Because accounting standards really don't change from state to state. Well, where medicine related legal issues or law can't change state to state. So for CPAs, the portability is generally one of the easiest among those three, sort of like just very difficult professions to get into. Now, one thing I want to mention that I probably should have mentioned earlier when we're talking about the test, there's an average of a 50% pass rate on those exams. So about half of the people fail, about half of the people pass. And the probabilities that a single person will pass all 4 exams on the first try, it's about 20%. So 1 out of 5 people pass all exams on the first try, and generally about half of the candidates drop off and never become a CPA. Now, generally that is because studying for the CPA exam, it's kind of a strange thing because there isn't a single official way to study. Like there isn't like the CPA book for you to study. There's tons of publishers that have all sorts of different programs. Some publishers just sell you a book or 4 books or a whole bunch of books. Some people sell you a bunch of videos. Some programs sell you cramp courses where you could basically come in 2-3 days before the exam and spend 3 days in a classroom just cramming for that exam. Some people offer 8-month programs or 8-week programs, 16-week programs where you go to a classroom and you sort of walk through the book. I took a program called Becker. I know my partner Alex took a program called I believe it was Roger or something like that, and Wiley. So there's all sorts of different programs. They range from a couple $100 for just the books to a couple $1,000 to some of those comprehensive programs. And a lot of people don't invest in those. And I got to tell you, if you can study on your own by just getting the book and pass, God bless you, but you might need a little bit reinforcement. And some of these programs have flashcards that you can study from, and books and videos, and an app on the phone so you can study from, kind of like a flashcard style studying. So sometimes, in those 80 to 100 hours per exam, you need all sorts of different ways of studying, audio, visual, reading, all sorts of things. So that's important to mention because that's where a lot of people just sort of, I don't want to say fail, but there's a lot of people drop off. And if you went through the 150 credit hours, you have a master's degree in accounting or tax, I would strongly suggest that you just keep trying. Just keep trying, because it is worth it at the end to be a CPA. Now, I did mention that this varies state by state. There's a website, thiswaytocpa.com, that has a page that shows you every single state and what their requirements are to become a CPA, whether you're supposed to be a citizen, resident, have a social security number, whether you can participate in an international program, and also depending on the state. But in Florida, for example, for you to become a CPA, you have to have worked under another CPA for at least 1 year, and that CPA needs to certify, sign a letter that says, yes, this person worked under me. They did 2,000 plus hours of accounting work under my supervision. So it does require for you to have worked with another CPA or have another CPA sign your license in order for the state to give you the actual license. Okay. Now, you have your CPA, you have your license, you're domiciled in the state you're working in. Every year or every 2 years, you have to get continued education. Okay, that means that you have to take classes. This could be online, this could be in person. Now you could even get CPE via podcast. Like I use an app called Earmark Media. I'll put links to that in the description. And I listen to podcasts, and I can submit for CPE credits. So it's pretty cool. So I get CPE credits in conferences. I get CPE credits by listening to podcasts. I get CPE credits through online webinars or online self-study programs where you just read and take a test. I also get CPE credits myself for teaching. So there's all sorts of ways to get your continuing education credits, but generally you have to do 40 hours of continuing education per year. So that's a week. So basically, out of the 52 weeks, you dedicate a whole week to keeping up basically with the tax laws or the accounting standards or anything that has to do with accounting. You can get CPE by learning Excel. You can get CPE by learning QuickBooks. So as long as the education provider has gone through the process of being approved to give CPE, continuing professional education, you can get those. And then when it comes time to renew your license in your state, you have to certify. In some cases, you have to submit the actual CPEs, the certificates that you have, and then you are able to renew your um, your uh, your license at that point. Okay, let's move on to optional organizations or optional sort of sub-certifications or specialties. Now, I belong to an organization called the AICPA, the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, and this is the a optional organization that you can be a part of, and by being a part of it, you get access to some continuing education courses. They do advocacy for the profession, so you paying those annual fees. They're supposed to invest that in lobbying the government to make things better for us CPAs and for our clients. But one of the things I like about the AICPA is that they have a couple of options for you to become sub-certified. So you're CPA dot CITP, CPA.CGMA, CPA.CFF, CPA.ACCA, AVV, CPA dot. So there's a couple of sub-certifications, and these are really sort of specializations, and I'll walk you through them. So one of them is one that I have is called the CITP, Certified Information Technology Professional. And essentially you take another exam that it's all about accounting from like computers and networks perspective. So not specific accounting software, but like how accounting software gets designed, how accounting software gets secured, how internal controls work with accounting software, how computer information systems in an accounting context are put together and secured together. So you take that test and then also you attest that you have experience working under another CITP or direct experience working with technology. And as long as you pass the exam and attest to that, then you get a sub certification and you pay extra for that. So I pay extra. I pay my AICPA annual dues, which is like $500 or $700, some big number like that. And then I pay a couple hundred more dollars to keep my CITP, my Certified Information Technology Professional, and that signals to the world that my focus really is in IT, in technology type stuff. The second sub certification is the Certified Global Management Accountant, CGMA, and that's another test that you take, and the test basically makes sure that you understand the intricacies of being an internal accountant in a business, in any business around the world. So like what are the general concepts behind being the CFO or a controller for a business. So a lot of CFOs get this specific training because this is sort of like internal accounting management, not so much the sort of the public accounting, which we mentioned earlier, which is for audits and reviews and IRS representation and financial statement preparation. That's more what the core CPA does. The CGMA is more about like, okay, the internal stuff. What do we do internally in a company to prepare financial statements that are functional for the general operations or management of that business. So those are the two sub-certifications that I hold with the AICPA. This is why I'm CPA.CITP.CGMA, and I put that sometimes in the in the footer of my email and my LinkedIn profile and stuff like that. I let the world know that I worked hard to have these two sub-certifications. There are other sub-certifications available. One is called the Certified Financial Forensics, CFF. This is for a CPA that wants to focus on looking for fraud. Okay, so looking for collusion in a company or just like searching financial statements or auditing the books of a company or even individuals to look for fraud or just illegal activity. So the people that like that stuff, that's a really interesting. It's called CFF, Certified Financial Forensics. Then there's another sub-certification called the ABV, so the Accredited Business Valuation. And if you are going to give value to a business that's going to be sold, or give value to a business that's going to obtain finance from a bank or even the SBA, there are CPAs that specialize in that stuff, and they not only do sort of like an audit or a review of the financial statement, they also are trained to understand, comparatively speaking, how that restaurant is worth in that location based on the market conditions and the environment that they're in and the type of customers that they have. So it's like not just the accounting concepts and understanding how much the historical value of a business has been, but also what is the future projected value, what are the future cash flows of that business. An ABV also dabbles a little bit into sort of real estate valuation and asset valuation. So when a business owns a piece of real estate or owns equipment, they also have to give value, have to give fair market value to that equipment because it's part of the value of that business. So if you're going to do valuation of businesses, the AVB is a really cool sub-certification. There's also the CVFI, which is which is an accredited or certified valuation of financial instruments. So this is a CPA that's going to audit uh, instruments used to sell financial products. So when you have a company creating derivatives or creating ETFs and creating any sort of products that are being offered to the public from an investment standpoint, this type of self-certification basically gives the public peace that they're put together sort of financially sound, these financial instruments. If you remember in the 2008 financial crisis, there was tons of financial instruments being created and being sold, and not there weren't enough CPAs sort of certifying the validity of these things. They were moving so fast and so quickly. This could have been one of the reasons why the world collapsed financially, because there wasn't enough CPAs specializing on financial instruments, sort of verifying and certifying and auditing the soundness of these products. So this certification became very popular afterwards, to sort of prevent this issue from happening in the future. And another sub-certification is called the PFS, the Personal Financial Specialist. These are CPAs that are not going to be focusing on businesses. They're going to be focusing on individuals and helping individuals do financial planning. So figuring out a strategy for investing their assets, for investing for retirement, for saving for college, for making wise decisions in terms of what they're going to invest in when it comes to real estate or the stock market, that sort of thing. So if you're going to focus on helping individuals and families sort of build wealth and protect wealth over time, that PFS is a good sub-certification. Okay, there could be more, and maybe after I make this video, the AICPA will continue pumping out more sub-certifications, but those are the ones that, probably the biggest ones, are the ones that I'm aware of from the AICPA. Now, beyond the AICPA, there's also state CPA societies. So if Florida has one, New York has one, California has one. Every state is going to have its own state society, which is like the AICPA, but focused only on that state. These state societies do local training, they do local conferences, they do advocacy for CPAs in that particular state, they do continuing education, and some states have their own sub-certifications for CPAs in that state. Things like government accounting sub-certifications. So if you're going to be doing accounting work involving government contracts and that sort of thing, some state societies have special training programs to help those CPAs specialize in that sort of thing. So you want to take a look at the state societies as well. Every state has one. Now let's talk about alternatives to becoming a CPA. So alternatives to being a certified public accountant. Now, in the US, there's over 600,000 CPAs, one of the most popular designations to have. However, if it's too much, it's too complicated, too much responsibility, too costly, there's a couple of options you can look at. There's another certification called the CFA, which is called a Chartered Financial Analyst. There's almost 200,000 CFAs worldwide. CFAs do have basic fundamental accounting training. Like they have to know how to read a financial statement. They don't necessarily have to know how to put it together, but they need to know how to read a financial statement, every single line, what it means, what it might mean. So a CFA at least understands the fundamentals of accounting, but then a CFA focuses on financial. So it focuses on the future, not so much the past. Accountants focus on the past, what happened, and this is what CPAs do. They tell you what happened, and the CFA is the one that says what might happen. So CFAs have to do with investments, have to do with the long-term value of the business, have to do with the potential cash flow of the business, the cost of finance, interest rates, time value of money, all those things are CFA. So if you like the financial side more than the sort of accounting historical side, CFA is a good one to look at. You do have to take an exam. I believe it's 2 or 3 exams, and they're not easy. They're actually pretty tough exams. Some people have reported that the first CFA exam is a little harder than any of the CPA exams. And the second one gets a little bit easier, and then the third one I believe is more like experience type of stuff. I don't know what the educational requirements are for the CFA. I assume you have to have at least 120 credits, but that's something to look at. So I would say if a CPA is not your thing, CFA could be one. Now, the sub-certification that I have, the CGMA, there is a version of that does not require for you to be a CPA. As a matter of fact, the CGMA existed prior to the AICPA acquiring the body that ruled that. So there's a body called CIMA. I forget exactly what it means, but look it up. CIMA that was acquired by the AICPA, and the CIMA had a standalone CGMA, the Certified Global Accounting Management or whatever it is, or Certified Global Management Accountant. So you can become a CGMA without being a CPA. So that's an option too, and that goes through uh, rigorous training and education too. So once you go that route, there's a lot of stuff that you have to self-study. I don't know if there is a study course for that, and I don't know if the exam for the CGMA is different when you're not a CPA. I assume that when you're not a CPA, it's a much more harder exam. For my exam was like multiple choice, took an hour, but I assume that if you're not a CPA, there's a lot more requirements. But that's pretty prestigious as well. There is 150,000 CGMAs in the world, so it does have some recognition. Another alternative could be the CMA, the Certified Management Accountant. And this is run by an organization called the IMA. And it's almost the same type of training that the CGMA has. I would say the CGMA is sort of the global version. The CGMA is the global version, and the CMA is sort of the US version. So you can take a look at those two options. I mean, either one, the CGMA or the CMA, will signal to the world that you understand accounting really, really well, that you've gone through testing, that you've gone through studying, not necessarily have to go through the entire path of the CPA. There's also something called the CIA, which is a certified internal auditor. So if you like audit and you want to work for a company that's going to do only internal audits, so while a CPA can do an external audit and can sign a financial statement and certify that these financial statements are fairly presented and anyone from the public can trust this information. That's what a CPA does. A CIA will work for a team that only does sort of the internal work of an audit. A lot of CIAs work in banks, a lot of CIAs work in financial institutions, investment institutions, that sort of thing. And a lot of big corporations have their own CIAs, internal auditors, just making sure that the entire company is working the way it's supposed to. So the CIA could be an option too. There's about 180,000 CIAs around the world. Another option could be the enrolled agent. Now, we have an entire different video focused on how to become a professional tax preparer, and I'll put links to that in the description. However, if you're going to be focusing on tax, if like this entire video, the purpose of you listening to this entire video is because you want to become a CPA because you want to do tax and tax only, tax is your area of specialty, then you actually don't need to become a CPA. The IRS Enrolled Agent, it's actually good enough. And I would venture to say that the average enrolled agent knows a lot more about tax than the average CPA. And the nice thing is the enrolled agent has the same recognition in terms of allowing you to represent the taxpayer in front of the IRS that a CPA does. So if you're going to be focusing only on tax, that would be what I would recommend. Just become an enrolled agent. The next one is a CFP. So the CFP is Certified Financial Planner, similar to the CPA PFS, but you can be a CFP without being a CPA. And if you're going to be focusing on personal finance, just like the personal financial specialist sub-certification for the CPA, the CFP is the one that signals to the world that you're an expert in all things personal wealth, investment, etc. And I believe there's just shy of 100,000 CFPs out there. There's also something called the Certified Fraud Examiner, which is, again, someone that's focused on financial forensics or fraud, similar to the CFF that the AICPA has as a sub-certification of CPA, but you can be a certified fraud examiner sort of on your own. And I believe there's 30 or 40,000 CFEs around the world. Now, it's important to mention that the CPA is mostly a US designation, where in the UK, for example, there's something called the ACCA, which is the Chartered Certified Accountant. In the UK, they don't use the word public. Public is more of like a US type of word. And in non-US countries like the UK, Australia, South Africa, any countries that sort of are predominantly, from the British Crown, they're English speaking, they're going to be more, even Canada, they're going to be more focused on this chartered accountant type of designation, not so much the CPA. Although in Canada specifically, the CPA almost has the same weight as the CA, and in some cases, CAs call themselves CPAs and CPAs call themselves CAs. That's kind of a mixed bag because it's part American and part um, uh, this sort of UK legacy. But keep in mind that even if you don't live in the UK, even if you are in the United States, you can look at that one too. And because that has global recognition, you can almost have the same level of clout as a chartered accountant, as an ACCA chartered accountant, that you could with a CPA, with just the exception that you can't do audits of US companies and you can't immediately represent a taxpayer in front of the IRS. Like you still have to become either a CPA or an enrolled agent to do that. So the ACCA is an interesting one to look at. Again, mostly is UK and rest of the world. I would say that's the biggest competitor, global competitor to the CPA in the United States. Okay, last part here, let's talk about how to make a living as a CPA. So a lot of CPAs start working in Big Four. This is the Big Four accounting firms. They're going to give you long hours. They're going to give you sleepless nights, but you're going to get tons of experience. The starting salaries for college students or recent graduates that become CPAs, it's somewhere in the 60s and 70s, but you can quickly escalate. If you're a hard worker, you can quickly escalate. And within 5 years, you can easily make $100,000 plus working for a Big Four firm. Problem is, it's a lot of work. It's long hours, especially during high season. And there's all sorts of high seasons when it comes to public with Big Four firms. It's not just tax high season, but there's also audit high season and that sort of thing. So that's a path you can take. Another path, again, as mentioned earlier, you can become a CFO or a controller or head of finance in a small company, medium-sized company, and escalate to CFO. CFOs can make 150 to $250,000 fairly quick within 10 years of the career. They can easily do that, and it's a pretty secure job, tons of job security there. Or you can have your own business. I think CPAs are probably the easiest type of profession to just hang your shingle. Uh, Doctors is a little bit more complicated because you have to go through residency and work in a hospital. CPAs don't really have to do that. CPAs, once they become certified, they could just start their own business and market themselves as Hector Garcia CPA locally, and naturally you start getting people that will ask for tax returns and ask for bookkeeping and ask for you to certify financial statements for somebody that's asking for a bank loan and that sort of thing. So fairly quickly you can build a really nice business and you can help your local community. A lot of CPAs don't even work with local communities. Like I've started with local communities, but now that I'm in YouTube, I work with people all over the world. Really, mostly most of the United States, but all over the world. I, as a CPA, when I started my business, I did bookkeeping, I did tax, I did accounting, I did payroll. I mean, I did all sorts of things. Um, so I would say, in terms of job security, CPA is probably one of the best things that you can do. And if you end up not working in accounting, if you become a CPA or not, but you do tons of accounting studies and you become prepared to be CPA or equivalent, and you end up not working in accounting, you can do anything and you have the fundamental language of business. Accounting is the language of business. So a CPA could essentially be successful at anything. You can open a restaurant, you can open a retail store, you can open an import export business, you can open an e-commerce store. But understanding the fundamentals of accounting will take you a very, very long way fast. It'll allow you to speak to bankers, it'll allow you to speak to an extent, to attorneys, allow you to speak to other accountants, allow you to speak to the IRS, understand what's happening, understand how the numbers work, understand the financial health of your organization. So I would recommend the accounting career, whether you become a CPA or not, or the equivalent of becoming a CPA, whether or not accounting ends up being your passion or not. And like me, for example, I now have a software company. It has to do with accounting. Like Right Tool is my software company, and it works with QuickBooks, and it's all highly linked to my experience in accounting. But if I dedicate 100% to the software company, I'm no longer an accountant. I'm no longer doing accounting work or tax work or whatever, but I understand the fundamentals of how a business runs, how profit works, how expenses works, how to go out there and talk to investors. So just being a CPA goes a very, very long way. So I certainly encourage you to work your hardest, try to become a CPA. If not, do your do the education portion. Pretend you're going to be a CPA. Do enough education to pursue it, even if you don't get it. And best of luck to you. So I hope you like that. All the links to everything I discussed will be down in the description, and I'll see you on the next one.